Hey everybody, Fradham here, and tonight I am going to introduce you to a really cool virtual environment called Proxmox, which is an open source hypervisor. You may be wondering what that means exactly. What is a hypervisor? Well, to put it simply, a hypervisor is a virtualization system that runs as the operating system, whereas systems like VirtualBox or VMware are applications that you run on top of your existing operating system that let you create virtualized systems. It's very convenient. It works. You don't have to have dedicated hardware. But a hypervisor is an operating system that runs around the idea of all it does is virtualize machines for you so that you can run as many virtual machines as you want, and you don't have the extra weight and overhead of an operating system lying underneath the visor. Anyways, so Proxmox is a hypervisor, and this gives us also direct access to the USB ports and direct access to any other hardware. So hypervisors tend to have direct access to the hardware, where systems like VirtualBox would use system pipes and pseudo drivers to access physical resources such as USB devices and hard drives. With a hypervisor, you would be able to map USB ports and drives directly to the virtual machine. So that port would be dedicated to a virtual machine. So if you plug in a device into a USB port, it will discover the device. My cat is scratching at my seat. Sorry, guys. I have 2 new cats. I've had them for about 2 months, and they make a lot of noise and they want a lot of attention. So we might be interrupted. Anyway, so the main advantage is you get I/O speeds, and for USB devices, if you have a USB 3 port, you're going to get USB 3 speeds. You don't have any translation in between the OS and the overlay on top. This is all built into the kernel, and it just works. So I really don't want to give a pro and con video between the difference between running a hypervisor and a virtual environment such as VirtualBox. I just would really like to just show you Proxmox and kind of get you familiar with it. I've been running it now for about 2 or 3 weeks, and I really like it. I'm in the process of converting my virtual machines that I run on my internal network to Proxmox, and so far it hasn't been too hard, mostly since I run containers. That's another thing that's really nice about Proxmox, is it a great way to manage your LXC containers. It doesn't do Docker yet, which hopefully someday they will, but right now it supports LXC, and I like having their interface for getting to and managing my containers. Instead of having to do it from the command line, I can do it from a nice web interface. So let's just get right into it, and I'll let you see what it looks like. We'll do an install. It installs really quick, and then we'll give a quick tour of it. Since Proxmox is a hypervisor, I decided to install this on some hardware. I have a Intel NUC, which is a 3rd or 4th generation, running an i3, 16 gigs of RAM, 250 gig SSD. So the install is actually pretty straightforward, since it is a Debian-based distribution, and it uses the KVM kernel and also uses QEMU, I believe, for multiprocessor for the virtualization. So you've got your typical GNU licensing that we have to agree to. And we just go ahead and let it target my hard disk, SDA. The screen resolution isn't all that great, so it doesn't do any detection, but it doesn't have a GUI. Once it's installed, it's just got a command line, and you access everything through a web browser. So it doesn't really need to detect your graphics because it doesn't run X on the actual hardware. So go ahead and set my stuff up, set up my root account. You will log in as root. You can add other accounts. Now, I was told that you don't have to add an email address here, but I went ahead and added mine just because. The Proxmox folk do offer paid for subscription-based support, and I think that's what the email address is for. So here's my IP address information. You might want to use a static IP address. on your network. You don't, well, you have to. You can't do a dynamic, but you might want to go into your DHCP server and reserve that IP address for this machine. I'm going to go ahead and give it a different name so I can find it on my network. And then next, and it's going to create the partitions. And from here, it's just a typical install, which actually goes pretty fast because it's really a bare bones system. Okay, so the total install time was about 2 minutes, which isn't too bad. So at this point, it wants to reboot. So we'll go ahead and reboot. And the first time you get your typical grub menu, you just go ahead and log into the Proxmox virtual environment. And unlike most distributions, with the exception of maybe Arch or something like that, this is going to boot into a shell prompt. And you log in with your root account with the password you set up. And the first thing you want to do is update the system. Okay, there's the upgrade. So we exit, and it shows you what your IP is to get to the admin interface. And at the login screen, you want to log in as root with the password you set up earlier. And you can change different types of login features, but I just use Linux PAM. That way the shell works with the same account and everything. So it's just works better that way for me. So hit login, and this is the no valid subscription. This is normal. You see this because they want to sell you a subscription to their support service, but you don't need it. So you could just hit OK and ignore it at this point. As you see, I already have a populated hypervisor here, because I've been playing with this for the past 2 weeks. I'm really enjoying it. But I wanted to show you all your virtual environments are under here, PVE. And I've got 3 running right now. I've got my Minecraft server, which we can go here and look at the summary. And you can see what I've given it. I've given it 2 CPUs. It's using 0.57% of 2 CPUs. So I probably even don't need 2 CPUs for this. And I can simply shut the VirtualBox machine down, go into resources and say, okay, make it 1 CPU. That's one of the nice things is on the fly, you can do that. Oh, and by the way, this isn't a virtual machine. This is a container. This is running LXC, which is another nice thing. And I'm using Proxmox primarily to manage my LXC containers. And I'm in the process of moving them over. Minecraft was the first one I moved over. And then I created my Pi-hole over here, which I haven't completely configured it yet, but it's all set up and ready to go. And that's another container. And then the third one, this is an actual virtual machine. And this is a Windows 10 box that I had to use to work on some stuff that was Windows 10 specific. So sometimes my job requires me to use Windows, so I have it here for emergencies. So you might be wondering, how do you get into this? Well, it's real simple. You just click on here. You can see the summary. You can see the hardware that it's using. You can see that I have an ISO image mounted. You can see my options, that I have it all set up. Task history of stuff I've done. Monitor. I'm not sure what the monitor does. You can back up your image. You can replicate it. If you have, that's another thing. Since this is a hypervisor, you can run more than one. And you can replicate across hypervisors for redundancy, which is really nice. Snapshots, a built-in firewall. It acts like a physical firewall to the OS. So you can set up firewalling rules to the VM without having to set up firewall software on the VM, which is kind of nice. So anyways, how do I get into it? Easy. I hit console. It uses VNC. And there it is, my Windows 10 box. Now, it's a little slow, but that's just video, and that's because it uses VNC, and VNC encrypts and compresses as it's putting data back and forth. And as you can tell, this is kind of small. I can actually make it bigger. Let's go full screen. And here's my VNC full screen. And this, for all intents and purposes, this is a full-blown Windows 10 box. One of the nice things that I've done with this, and is I got USB pass-through working, which I've never been able to get to work properly in VirtualBox. USB, I can plug a device into the USB port, like I'll do it right now. I know you can't see. And it will detect it. Hopefully. I just put a USB drive in there. So I should now see under my PC. Okay, so maybe I'm full of poop. It worked yesterday. I've never plugged this particular one in, so it might be a little confused. Well, I had USB working. It might be this. Oh, this is a USB 3 stick, and that may not be a USB 3 port. So, anyways, it does work. I've had my webcam plugged into it for testing. I got one right here. Let's see if I can get it to work with the webcam. Put that sucker in. And I don't know what I can use for webcam. Is that it? Hey, look, there I am. So that's through the USB. Now the lag isn't the OS that you're seeing. The lag is because I'm doing this over VNC. VNC sucks for a desktop manager. So this is using USB pass-through through the VM on the VM server, which is that Intel NUX. And as you can see, I got my green screen behind me, and you can see my dirty room and my ratty shirt, and that I haven't combed my hair today. Anyways, so it does work. And I can unplug it. And to get out of this, you just go there, and you don't even have to. You don't close anything, you just get out of there, and boom. And for the Linux stuff, you could do the same thing. You go to console, and since these are containers, you can see that I just go straight to a terminal. I left myself logged in, so normally you'd see a login screen, but the container thinks I'm logged into a physical keyboard. It's not an SSH or anything. So load's a little high on that. Don't know why. So I'll show you how do you make a container. It's actually really, really easy. You click on PVE, that's what I named it. And I say create a CT, which is a container. I want it on this node. It'll give it an ID. We'll call it sample container. Make it an unprivileged, that's for security. Resource pool, none. Password, super secret. You could even give it an SSH key. Template. Now this is the interesting thing. Under template is where you find your containers. I can do an Archbase or a Debian own cloud. So we'll just do another Archbase. You can store them in different places. I have a NAS drive, but I don't have any containers on there. So back to Arch. And then a root disk. I do everything on, well, we'll do a local LVM, but all my other containers are running on my NAS, so they don't even run on the VM, which is kind of nice. It loads the root file systems all over the network. Give it one CPU, 512K, we'll give it a gig. Match the swap. Network, we'll just say DHCP. DNS is assigned by DHCP, confirm. Everything looks good. Finish. Here's the status. And it's almost done. Task OK. Once you see that, that means it's done. You don't even have to leave that open. Now you see we now have a new one. And it's not on, so the connection is going to fail. We'll go to summary. Here's all my stats. This is another thing, all these stats, disk I/O, memory usage. It's just really nice to know all this stuff. Sometimes I'm finding I have to run it twice. I don't know why. Mostly on the Windows 10 one. It gets like halfway through the boot up and then fails, and then you hit start again and it works. I don't know why. Excuse me. Now I should be able to go to console. There's my login. I now have a little basic Arch install. That quick. Probably the quickest you'll ever install Arch. You. Okay, so there's... It's got networking. Oh, you know what? Their install... Is it Pacman Comp? You have to set up your repositories. So that's for a different video. Anyway, so that's basically it. Now, if I want to create a new virtual machine, it's the same thing. Create VM, node, PVE, give an ID of 104, virtual Linux, OS, Linux, storage local, ISO image. Oh, I don't have an ISO for it. Did I put one on the SAN or the NAS? No. So if I had a Linux ISO, I would just select it here and then continue, and then you would boot up to the install screens that you normally see from a Windows or a Linux install. The nice thing is that everything is maintained through this interface. You can look at all the resources being used. You can see what my CPU usage has been like. So you can see over the time since 11/26/2017, I have never, well, that's today, but I've never even gone to 101%. I haven't even used a full CPU. So like this box doesn't need 2 CPUs. Shows you my network traffic, my memory usage. I've never gone over a gig, or barely gone over a gig. Disk I/O. It doesn't really show much for disk I/O, and that might be because I'm running over the network. So the disk I/O would be minimal. Whereas the one we just made, the sample container, I made it local, so we'd probably see disk I/O there. Let's go look. So summary. Yeah, see disk I/O here because it's on the local disk. The nice thing is you can add disks easily. You can add USB drives. I was having it all run off a USB 3 1 terabyte drive. Moving it to the network attached storage was kind of a experiment, and it's been working so well that I'm just going to leave it that way. See how well things run. I might eventually oversaturate the gigabit link, and then I might have to switch to something else. We'll see. But that's pretty much it. This has become my go-to environment for creating containers and for virtual machines that don't require a lot of graphical performance. So I wouldn't game over this. I know some people like to try to game in virtual environments, and this is not the solution for that. This is more for servers or just a simple desktop. The Windows 10 desktop environment has come in handy for me for work-related stuff. I no longer have to dedicate... I run this at work also, and I no longer have to dedicate a full-blown computer for my desktop Windows machine, and I actually just keep it off, and whenever I need to use Windows at work, or whenever I need to use Windows at home for work, I just fire it up and let it go. I did install Steam on this just to see, and it runs, but I didn't install any games. I know games won't run very well. You saw how crappy the webcam looked. Just imagine games. 6 frames per second if you're lucky. Go ahead and power this down since I'm not using it. Shut down. Summary. That one had disk I/O. It might be using swap. I can't remember how I set this one up. This might be set up. The Win 10 I think is set up to use local disk and not over the network. But my containers are all using the network attached storage, the NAS. So my final thoughts on this is that it's a great virtualization system if you have the hardware to support it. It doesn't take too much. The system I installed this on is an Intel i3. Geez, I think it's not even the current. It's maybe 2 generations back. It's like the 3rd or 4th generation of the Intel NUC. It's a little solid state computer about the size of an iMac Mini with a SSD and about 16 gigs of RAM. And it's been running everything I throw at it. It's running Windows 10 just fine. It's running the containers that I created just fine. And overall, I'm pretty happy with it. I was going to move it to my old i7, but I just haven't had time to, and there hasn't been a need. So eventually it'll get moved to an i7, then I'll probably even see better performance. I'm not sure. The biggest con is that since to access the console of a GUI environment such as Windows 10 is through VNC, as you saw, there's lag. So you definitely don't do gaming on it. You don't want to do video editing. It's for everything else. I have a Windows 10 VM because I need it for work sometimes. Mostly because our VPN and stuff is through Windows and I haven't figured out how to do it in Linux. So it works for what I need to do. Now, for the Linux containers, it's awesome. I actually saw a performance improvement when I moved my Minecraft server from my old install to this, and it was also in a container. Same with Pi-hole. So overall, I'm finding non-GUI stuff just runs really fast in it, and it just, because it's got a dedicated kernel that was compiled for virtualization, so it just works really well. So I like it. In the 3 weeks that I've had it, I had it crash once, and the weird thing is that the version I'm running on my work computer crashed the same day, the same exact hard lockup, and I think there was an update that just caused the system to crash after a little bit of time. But since then, I had to reboot. Since then, it's been running great, and I haven't had any issues. I've had solid uptimes, and it just runs great. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like and subscribe and share and all that stuff. And let me know in the comments below, would you like to see more videos on this type of stuff, specifically Proxmox, since I'm really getting to know it. I could do videos on how to do different things in it. Just let me know what you guys would like to see, and I will work it out. Thanks a lot, and I hope you enjoyed it. Take care. Bye-bye.